Let's bring it. Bring it. It's Gridiron 360. I'm Bill. That's Dave. We're talking 2020 NFL draft prospects, other names of note outside of the top 12 in the Big Ten, and we are on the offensive side of the ball. We're talking about some other names from the wide receiver position. No, but can be in a minute.
All right,
can be in a minute.
All right. Sorry, side conversation. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
There you go. All right, so let's start with a senior from Minneapolis, played for the Gophers at the University of Minnesota. Mr. Tyler Johnson stands at 6'1", 206, 37/8 arms, 9-inch hands. I went back just to freshen up on Mr. Johnson. I was playing with your little fun NFL draft network, the draft network thing, drafting for my Giants. As you get late, there's names that pop. I mean, I remember a lot of the guys' names. I remember all these guys' names, sans like three at the bottom. I remember Johnson. And so as I went back to just, freshen up, I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yep.
Yep.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Nah. Yep. I remember. Oh, yeah. This guy's a playmaker, man. He is a possession receiver, okay?
Yep.
He runs maybe not really sharp routes, but he's got great spacing. He's got great hands. He loves to go up. He can do the back shoulder. He loves to go up for a ball. He's 6'1", but he'll go up with the best of them for a 50-50 ball. Is great in space with the defenders. Is maybe even better in space when the ball's in his hand. He's a yak. He is a yak guy. And as I started to and look at the overview in NFL.com's draft profile.
Well, hold on. Before you get into that, I want to say, when I was going to describe this kid, and this is where maybe I have a scouting future. I don't know.
Hey.
But when I was going to call this kid, I was going to call him a bully. He's a bully.
Yeah. What does that say? The
so
first
read
line,
what it says about
him. The first sentence on the overview says, contested catch warrior who plays the game like a big brother, imposing his will on younger brothers on the playground.
AKA bully.
This is awesome, dude.
He's a tough kid. And here's the interesting thing. This used to be way back when. There used to be this different classification of types of running backs in the NFL. You had your speed demons. You had your one-cut guys. You had your guys that could make you miss in space. You catching the ball. Because the game has become more pass-heavy, now receivers, you remember when you used to have two receivers, what did you have? You had the man, which was hopefully a faster guy, and then you had the sure-handed receiver. Now you've got this weird mix of all these different types of receivers you can throw out on the field with all these different skill sets, and this is a guy, I think, that finds a home. Because their teams
are going much more to an 11 personnel, and you just got you got 5 down linemen and receivers. One back and one
Well, you see it now. Usually what did they do? In the beginning of the game, they'd announce the starters that it would be your 2 receivers, your tight ends, your 2 backs, and now it's your 3 receivers. And that's the starting lineup. And this is a kind of guy, what I like about him is he's just tough. And tough players, he kind of reminds me, this is probably high praise, but reminds me a little bit of a Hines Ward. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah.
He was really good. But and then obviously had a great pro career, but he was tough. And he'd always get up and smile. He'd get popped and he would smile. And that was the thing, that's got to be intimidating in sort of a way. And this he's feisty. He's not dirty. He's not like a prima donna, but he plays with a little bit of an edge.
Yeah,
and I like that in him.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at some of the weaknesses they have. They said top end speed falls below the NFL mark. Route work needs to throw defender. Route work doesn't throw defenders off scent. Below average foot quickness. Had a little physical after catch, but not very elusive. I got to be honest. That's right, but those aren't weaknesses to me because that's not the type of receiver he is. Like I said from the get-go, he doesn't run super crisp routes, but I said like he might even be better with the balls in his hand. I said yak. It says physical after the catch. He might not be elusive, but he's got good vision with the ball. He's not like zip like a Lamar Jackson, hard to just a wet worm. But he just knows where to go with the ball, and it's not like he's gonna. It says top end speed. Well, he doesn't need it if he finds the right hole and gets down there. And even so, I saw a lot of them where guys were able to catch up to him, but he's still, with his abilities, got a huge gain.
70% of the catches in the NFL are contested.
Yeah.
If you catch the ball, what a quarterback's like. They throw the ball to guys that can win one-on-one battles. He's not going to demand double team coverages because of his athleticism is somewhat limited, but he's physical. And you think about putting that guy in a second or third receiver role and a guy that'll just go out and fight for the ball. Quarterbacks may like that, and I liked what I saw. I mean, again, I want to go back to what we said about Rodney Smith. Like, I started watching them because you were the row in the boat guy, and you got me kind of paying attention to him. Listen, and I liked him. I thought he likes to play physical.
Yeah, if you watch this team, if you look at Johnson's stats, he played all 4 years. Obviously, the last 3 was a starter, but progressed every year in every category I can see. To this past year, he had 86 receptions, just over 1,300 yards, 13 TDs, had a 73-yard long. So, I mean, again, he progressed every year in his careers in receptions, in yards, in his average, in TDs. I mean, it's nice. I like this kid. I think he could be a gem.
And he went up against, he obviously played against tough defenses in Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin,
Michigan.
Yeah, so he's seen some decent competition. I like the bully thing. That's what I thought of when I first saw him. It's that willing. It's the mind over matter,
right?
And I like that in a player. That's a football player to me, and I like football players.
All right, let's move on to the next guy. We spent a while on Mr. Johnson. The next receiver from Detroit, Michigan, a junior for the Wolverines, Mr. Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver known as DPJ. Stands at 6'2", 212, 33.5-inch arms, 10 1/8-inch hands, ran a 4.48 in the combine, 44.5 vertical, 139-inch broad. This is a guy that came out of high school, very highly touted. I think he was one of the best receivers in the country, actually. He got better in his career at Michigan. As a 5-star recruit coming in, I think a lot was expected of him. And, his first season, he got better every season. I take that back. He regressed this past season, but he got better, doubled up his freshman year to his sophomore year. But I think there was probably a lot of expectations when you have these big, 5-star receiver. Any freshman that's a 5-star at any position could fall below expectations, especially if you're rolling them out there right away. This past year, he had 34 receptions, 438 yards, 6 TDs. I watched a lot of him just because he's the name. Again, I follow high school recruiting. I remember him coming out of high school. He never wowed, but he's going to get picked up at some point in this draft. I don't know that he's extremely exciting in terms of. I mean, he's fast. He's pretty fast. He's ran a sub 5.40. For a 6'2", 212 guy, that's not too bad. I just think when you talk about the last guy, Tyler Johnson, this is a guy that competed against the same same defenses and the same talent, and Tyler Johnson just jumps off the page, and Peoples-Jones just doesn't. But certainly was a guy, again, out of high school, was one of the top receivers in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think he struggled somewhat with consistent and good quarterback play. I think some of that needs to fall there. But overall,
I agree.
I didn't see consistency out of him.
Yep.
I just didn't. There was a lot of things physically to like about him, and obviously his recruiting status tells you kind of what was thought of him coming out.
Right.
But I saw too many games where I was just kind of like, man, he's the 7-yard guy. He catches the ball for 7 yards. doesn't really like. Again, I look for guys like because we're talking about the draft. We're talking about the best of the best. And I wanted to see that guy take over games a lot more than I ever did. I just never saw him there. I would like to have seen a guy like that show up big in an Ohio State game, which Michigan as a team has struggled to show up in that game many a time. I don't know. Inconsistency is how I would mark him, and I just don't think that's a recipe for the NFL.
Sure.
Not saying that he won't get drafted. There's some measurables to like about him and his speed, but when you talk about a guy that's 6'2", 210 plus, is that what you said, 212 or something like that?
212, yeah.
Yeah, 212, and runs a 4.4, and then yet I'm reading on his combine thing, which makes sense to me, and based off the eye test for me is they're like he's not good enough to play on the outside, and that kind of talks about his inconsistency right there. So.
Right. All right. Well, let's move to the next guy who I actually do like. And, as a lot of people have it, they have this guy behind Peoples-Jones, and I might go so far as to put him above him, but that's what the Combine does for you because this guy only ran a 4.640 at the Combine from Little Rock, Arkansas, redshirt senior for the Ohio State Buckeyes, KJ Hill. 6 foot, $196, 29 1/8 inch arms, 9 4 inch hands. Again, a 4.640 at the Combine. Threw up 17 reps on the bench. That's tight.
Yeah.
I'll take it for a receiver. Ran 32.5 inch vertical, 114 inch broad. So outside of the bench, because I think that's all right for a receiver, probably good right there, middle of the pack, maybe a little above average. But the Combine didn't do him much love. Again, playing your little draft network game. There was, this is a guy that, my concern, here's where I will go back to Ohio State for a slot receiver. Because if Sterling Shepard gets hurt again with concussions, we're going to need a guy behind him. This is a guy, he was the all-time receptions leader at Ohio State.
Yep.
That's pretty good. I got to tell you, I saw a lot this year of guys. They had so much talent, were so tremendous offensively, especially at all the skilled positions, and it led me to wonder how good quarterback Justin Fields was. Now, when we played him in the playoff, I was like, he's good. He'll get better. He's a good quarterback, but he was throwing to guys that were wide slap open.
Yeah, that was the hard part to watch their offense this year. Is it seemed like there was very little contested plays, which it speaks to how good they were overall. But
let me tell you something. Here's a kid though who he understands what he is, and I think he does his best not just to work well with what he's got, but continue to try to get better and grow. He runs good routes. He's a slot guy. He is a hard-working guy across the middle. He's consistent. And that's when you're talking about wide receivers, that's something for a slot guy that you really want to have is more consistency because that's, you're the guy they go to a lot of times in the pinch. This is also a guy whose hands, what did I say, 9.25 inch hands. I mean, good hands. Might be one of the best things I like about this kid. He caught a lot of balls and a lot of touchdowns for Ohio State. Particularly this past year, he had 10 touchdowns, had 57 receptions. Didn't clear 1,000 yards in a year, but, what I saw of him was he had great hands.
Well, you said he set the record for a number of receptions?
Yep. Great hands.
So basically, what it comes down to is, when I
watch
watch
who
him
else
play,
did that at Clemson.
What, Hunter Renfrow?
No, DeAndre Hopkins. Great hands. Great hands.
Yeah, I think we're talking about different skill sets.
I know that, but when I'm talking about hands,
he's not a guy that stands out to me as spectacular. He's dependable, and that. Can he carve himself out a role in the NFL with that? I don't watch him and go, I don't gush over him. I want to be a little careful with Ohio State receivers. You know, I mean, again, we talked about it, and I mean, just look at last year. Who tore onto the scene early in the year and ended up putting together a really good year last year was kind of a little bit of an afterthought. Not somebody I was thinking of to be a really good receiver, and that's McLaurin.
Yep.
So, you know, you don't know. Now, he's a different type of receiver.
But you said it before, then that guy's all right. And then you got the best receiver in the game, Michael Thomas.
Yeah, and he was not expected to be that.
And then you were talking about, look at a guy like Ted Ginn. Never really lived up to the hype, but he's still around, and he's still being used. He's productive.
Yeah, and he's
Can't
in one.
fault it.
Yeah,
He made
I
a good
agree.
career for himself.
Yeah, so, I mean, I just think the upside with him is limited. But if that's what you need as a guy that's just going to be, we just talked about reliability. I mean, in the NFL, look at. To be honest with you, I think this is some of what happened with Tom Brady. I know, we've seen the news clippings, and then he did his interview talking about how he knew going into last year that it was probably his last year with New England. But some of what we talked about was, Brady never had prolific receivers outside of Randy Moss. Like, he had very good receivers. He made a lot of them better because not a lot of them went somewhere else and were amazing. But what Brady wanted was, you better be where you're supposed to be, and you better catch the ball when I get it to you. And they'd carve you up all the way down the field. They'd carve you up. They could do a 13-play drive like nobody's business. And so is this a kind of guy that kind of fits that mold? Can he go out there and just catch the ball? When he's called upon, and that may be his niche in the NFL. He does have some special teams background, so maybe that's something that he can work with too as well. Not terribly fast, so I don't know that that's going to be where he's at, but not all the, the best returners are real fast, but not all the returners in the NFL are lightning quick. Some of them are just really reliable and know how to get an extra on a punt return, an extra 7 or 8 yards. If he can do something like that, he's got a shot to, carve himself out a little bit of room there.
Okay. All right. So that's 3. Tyler Johnson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, KJ Hill. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. The next guy, wide receiver in the Big 12 from Macon, Georgia, man. He's right down this here south of us, about 900 miles this here. From Macon, Georgia, Junior, Mr. Quintez Cephas, standing at 6'1", 202, 32 1/8-inch arms, 8 3/4-inch hands. Ran a disheartening 4.73 at the 40. Did throw 23 up on the bench, 38.5-inch vertical, 124-inch broad. Do you want to talk about Mr. Cephas from the Wisconsin Badgers?
Yeah, let me just say this. I'm not going to put a whole lot into this. It was an offense from a passing perspective. You and I talked about it all season long. We're like, man, they don't have to throw. They don't have to throw. But we were like, you know what? They just don't have to because they were that good at running.
Yep.
But then they got later in the year. Obviously, they ran into their stumble with Illinois. And I remember watching Cone run in that game.
Yeah.
The passing game was always just kind of was kind of tough. So it's hard to really grade the guy from that perspective because an offense that wasn't using the passing game to ever take control of the game. So I kind of go back and look at this guy's measurables, small hands, slow 40 time. I mean, he's got a lot working against him.
Yeah.
There were some times where I thought he caught some good balls, in the games. He caught some tough catches.
Kirk Herbstreit liked him a lot.
Did he?
He'd be talking. They go through some highlights and stuff, and he'd and they called the game the Wisconsin. Blah, 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 blah. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been the Wisconsin-Minnesota game. But yeah, he was. Cephas. He did come up when they did throw the ball. He seemed to be the only receiver they had on the field.
Yeah.
Apparently he had.
I think at times he was the only.
Yeah,
receiver
I mean he had. Let's see. This last year he had 59 receptions, 901 yards, 7 TDs. That's up from 2017. If you read his profile, he sat out 2018.
Yeah, well, he got a little bit of trouble that kind of cleared itself up.
Yeah, he got in a little bit of trouble
off
the field.
But it ended up, in fairness to him, it did end up getting dismissed. It was a sexual assault charge, and he was acquitted
and he
early
came
in the
back
year.
to the team, and he stepped right back in and performed as maybe their only wide receiver. So, interesting receiver in Cephas. I think he'll get drafted, certainly. I just don't know. I mean, he's a possession-type guy. He's not going to blow doors off you. He's not. I don't think he's a superb route runner. He's not explosive, but he did seem like on some of those big catches he had for Wisconsin, it's like once he did start to get going, and especially if he was able to make a move and get a little separation, like he started to pick up steam.
Yeah, what I would have liked to see out of him more, because they could be so. They could have been, with good quarterbacking and good receiver play, been so much more deceptive because of how strong they could run. I would have liked to see more big plays out of them. I don't want to totally fault him for that, but there were times where I felt like he could have done more for himself. I think his biggest challenge is going to be, and we kind of talked about this a little bit with KJ Hill, is if these guys really aren't special, the receiving group that's out there right now are so deep this year that I think, there is just so much comparison out there that is going to be, it's going to be tough for a guy like this. He could.
I think once you kind of get outside of like the first two, maybe 2.5, 3 rounds, and then there's a ton of more receivers out there, it's just going to be more of, does this guy fit the need, a role that we need in our receiving core? We have we need a guy with this tall guy that can go up together. We need a possession. We need a slot. Like just fitting a role there at that point. It might not necessarily be based on their, how they rank by anybody's board.
Yeah.
It just, they may see that this is the next best guy in this receiving position that we need on our team.
Yeah, I think the problem is, though, we've talked about multiple people that kind of fit this guy, and there's only so many of those positions to go around. Again, not to dog him. We're at that point now where we're talking about guys that maybe aren't special. So right now we're probably looking about, is there something in their game that gives them the potential for a high ceiling? I think makes these guys at this part of the conversation in any conference more appealing. And I don't know that he has something at this point to fall on. But again.
Well, here's a guy that might just be that. The next receiver from Fort Wayne, Indiana, a senior for the Ohio State Buckeyes, wide receiver Austin Mack, standing at 6'1", same as Cephas.
Yep.
208, 33 and 5/8-inch arms, a little bit longer there, 10-inch hands, one of the taller. Did run a 4.59 at the combine, 31.5-inch vert, 117-inch broad. That's a little bit on the shorter side. With a guy like Mack, you may remember his name called. Obviously, they were a prolific offense, but very seldom. So here's the thing. He's a senior. I mean, he's seen, let me see, his statistics from, he started pretty much his sophomore year, saw the field, had a couple receptions his freshman year in 16, and went from 24 receptions in 17 to 26 in 18 to 27 in 19, and not one year did he top 400 yards. Went from 2 TDs to 1 TD to 3 TDs respectively in those years. Okay? So he's a guy that I think he was like a 4-star coming out of high school. There's a lot of expectations, as I had said before, with some of these kids. They're still just 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. It's much different when you go from the high school to college than college to the NFL.
Yeah.
So, but there's been a lot of receivers on that team that have come and gone and really kind of been more successful than him, that he's, never really lived up to the hype. It's a guy who, I think he has, with his big hands and his big arms, that gives a bigger target. I think he's more of an intermediate route runner, but some of the stuff I saw, I was just trying to catch up on a little bit on his tape. A lot of the balls were caught on his body instead of his hands. You got to get away. There are times where I will say, a lot of receivers, you catch the ball out in front of you, catch the ball over your head, catch it out in front of you with your hands. There are times where there might be a need to catch it on your body, believe it or not. Okay? But the overarching rule is to catch it with your hands, and this guy constantly caught it with his body.
Yeah, he had some injury stuff too, which limits the amount of exposure that he gets. 2019, he started, I've seen 2 things. I saw one said 10, one said 11 games, whatever. It doesn't matter. He played in 11. but he only started 8. He had, again, when you have injury concerns, when your production is limited, you're looking for what's the silver lining? What's the thing about him that can be either developed or he didn't get a chance to show in his game? Again, sometimes it's hard, as good as offenses are. Their offense was amazing. I mean, they were at top 4 or 5 in the country all year long, if not number 1 at points. But again, did a lot through the running with the quarterback and J.K. Dobbins to move the ball. And then, as you said, it was amazing, and you got to give some credit to them, as players and as coaches. But at the same time, like, some of what we dogged Justin Fields for a little bit was, man, I want to see this guy throw contested catches. Like, every game I'm watching him and he's throwing to a guy that's got no one within 7 yards of him. It's hard to tell where that comes from. Is that just great scheming? Is that your athletes are so much better than everybody else? But as you can tell, like, we've talked about 2 of their receivers, and neither one of them are considered athletic juggernauts, yet these guys were wide open when they were. I just think his productivity being limited, he probably would have needed a lot of offseason stuff to help him. You don't know what the NFL's been doing. They're not sitting there on their hands. I don't know what the rules were for how much exposure they were allowed to have. You obviously can't run them. Who was it that did somebody just did a pro day, their own pro day, and clocked like a 4.28, and everybody's like, all right, come on now.
Who was it?
There's
been a lot of guys.
I'll think about it.
There was a corner from Okie State that just did his own pro day.
Yeah, they're doing this on film. It was kind of like, it was funny because you look like Colin Kaepernick went and did that.
Even if it's not them or their own guys, they've got the people, if they are official guys to take those measurables, like if it's strength and conditioning coach, it's the ones for their team. So they do like their guy. I mean, come on. Yeah. It's hard to say that that's not going to play more. They're not going to make their guy look bad.
No, but here's the big difference is when you have scouts there, and this is true of the combine. I didn't know this until this year. Like, they had some guys where they said, okay, you're a receiver, but I want to see you do the running back drills. Or you're a running back, and I want to see you do the receiver drills. Probably a little bit more common because we want to see you do catch them. Now, the player has the right not to do that. But when you go into a pro day, understand there's a scripted setup for those pro days. But don't think they're not going to the scouts and saying, what is it you need to see? And, like, with these pro days, it's not. There's not scouts there going, I want to see X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And then more the point is, how do I know you didn't edit the tape? I'm probably being a little bit mystery.
The benefit of the doubt,
you do, but you just don't know.
Way that, yeah.
And so,
okay, let's a conversation for another time. I mean, how can you send in something that's like a 4.2840?
I wish I could find it because
really with a straight face and send it, and even if you did run it, I'd almost want to be like, all right, let's just send 4.35, okay?
Yeah, like, we're looking good.
Let's go 4.38. We're still sub 4. That's nuts. Let's not draw any red flag.
I forget
Again,
who it was.
A conversation for a different day. Let's move on to the next guy. From Florida, a senior for the Ohio State University Buckeyes at 6'4", but only $198. Mr. Benjamin Victor. Huge arms, maybe the biggest we've mentioned, 34 1/8, 9 5/8 inch hands. He was another guy that was, I think he was like a 4-star out of high school out of Florida. So Ohio State was able to dip into the speed and the athletes down in Florida. 4.68 40, only threw 9 reps up on the bench. 35-inch vert.
Well, at 128 arms.
128-inch broad. Yeah, so he has a lot further to go with that.
Well, not just that, but he's only 198.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Were you just reading? Are you sure? Go check. Is that James Blackman's? No. That's awesome. That's so true. This kid, here's the thing. He and if you look at his stats, he had, let's see, 2017, he's a senior. He got a few reps his freshman year. 2017, 23 receptions, 350 yards. 2018, 21, 354. 2019, 34, 545. Went 7, 4, 6 in touchdown category respectively. But I did see somewhere that like his last year he packed on, I think like maybe 20 pounds or something like that. And that's it. Here's another thing I saw. He never was a starter at Ohio State.
Yep.
However, you look at Austin Mack and the numbers, especially reception-wise compared to him, he definitely had a certain role in that team. But let me be honest. I mean, this is a team with a lot of receivers. So are my Clemson Tigers. There's another guy, too, in this draft, DeAndre Overton. Okay?
Yep.
Never a starter. Highly touted out of high school. And DeAndre, he even had a game this year with like 4 TDs. And he's been great. But again, I'm going back to before where I said at this point you're looking for a certain role player. So this is a kid. He knows how to play a role. Okay, he's going to be maybe a wide receiver 4. Maybe he could get into the 3rd role. Maybe a 5. But he's tall, has a wingspan.
Yeah.
And he's, this is a guy that certainly at 198 pound on a 6'4" frame, the NFL could probably pack on another 15. Okay? You can pack on at least that and, maybe help him a little bit in terms of dealing with some, press defenders or what have you.
Well, you see these guys, these development guys that are generally, not active on game day or maybe even stashed on practice squad. But this is kind of when we get down to these guys. Is there something, I just said it, is there something about them that can be worked? And unlike these other guys who are not massive, sure-handed, limited speed, this is a guy that's big. He's got something. Okay. Can you put some weight on him?
Exactly.
Can you develop
so
this guy?
One of the things they said is he's kind of leggy, okay, like in running. They said he can be, he has a strange wiggle that with the ball in his hands, he's not super like elusive or quick burst or explosive, but he manages his way around and he's leggy. So name a couple receivers in the NFL that are leggy that you think of like that. I mean, I could give you at least one sat out this past year. I can name you. Nope, I can go 2. One of the guys that was a Chicago Bear. Not this year, but he was.
He was not this year.
He drafted by Chicago now.
Alshon?
Yep.
Alshon.
That's a guy that's he's leggy, but like he gets the ball in his hands and knows how to make a move here or there and get a few extra yards, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, Alshon Jeffrey's the type of guy.
AJ Green.
Yeah, these are high-end guys. But the whole idea is here, and I think you're right on with this, is there's guys that you can be that you've got to develop. What I do like, and they talk about this in his profile, but I do know who this guy is because he shows up in games at big moments.
Yes, he does.
And here's the whole thing is
he had a certain role and he played it well.
Well, it's also when your number's called upon in the NFL, which, most guys have 2 or 3 plays that are like these kind of guys that are back end of the draft, priority free agents. They might get into a couple of games. They might be active with a couple of injuries, and they're going to get 2 or 3 passes, and that's going to determine whether they get a continued career or whether they're never heard from again. And because I always think about it, who are always the most popular guys on practice squads? They're receivers. He comes in, he makes one big catch, and you're like, oh, this guy's going to be awesome. I mean, the Bears have 2 guys right now from Georgia, Riley Ridley, who I can't remember. I don't think they stashed him on the practice squad because I think he would have got picked up. But I think they did one of those, IR, you're injured, wink, wink.
Yeah.
They IR'd him. I think they did that with him because I don't think they kept him active. But then they had a guy, Javon Wims. And I will tell you, I like what I've seen out of Javon Wims. He's caught everything they've ever thrown at him, and it's allowed him to stick. But he was a 7th-round receiver who had measurables, but he was on a team where he was good, but he wasn't great. But you got to show up when you are, and this is the kind of guy maybe that can hide for a few years and become something because there is that ability after the, there is that there's that special thing that maybe you can attach
I think
to.
he'll get drafted for sure. It might be late. I don't think undrafted. I think someone will draft him just because there's something you can work with there. The 3 other receivers in this draft that are eligible: Mr. Darrell Stewart Jr. from Michigan State, Mr. Cody White from Michigan State, who he has shown up. He was better in his early on in his career. Mr. Nick Westbrook of Indiana. Also, a few tight ends in the Big Ten that are coming out. Luke Farrell of Ohio State. Sean McKeon of Michigan. Tyler Mabry of Maryland. Kyle Peniston of Rutgers. Nick Eubanks of Michigan, Matt Seibert, Michigan State, and Nick Bowers of Penn State. There is one more guy, and I leave him for last, and he is a tight end from the Big Ten. I want to get him in really quick. From Nashville, Tennessee, a senior for the Purdue Boilermakers, Mr. Bryson Hopkins stands at 6'4", 245, 32 1/8 inch arms, 10 1/8 inch hands, 4.66 40, 21 bench, 33.5 vert, 116 broad. He is, by a lot of counts, he's definitely probably top 5, 6, 7 tight ends in this draft. And that's, not bad. I mean, there's some tight ends, the kid from Washington, Cole Kmet from Notre Dame. A lot of boards have him in front of Thaddeus Moss from LSU. So I just want to take a minute and talk about Hopkins.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know this. I just actually read this, that his dad was I think it was an offensive lineman for Tennessee. Let me just double check. He was a Pro Bowl offensive lineman.
Yeah,
you know how I feel about the pedigree in the right way.
Yes, you do, sir.
I just think guys that can play. What I like about
They
this
said
kid,
this is a very athletic kid, and
he's a pass catching tight end. He's
that's
not
what people look for.
He's
So he'll get
right.
drafted.
Now he's 6'4", so he's not enormous in height, but certainly that is definitely functional at the tight end position. 245. Kid's got 10 1/8 hands.
That's right.
He's got
and his wingspan's not bad. It's just like an inch shorter than Victor.
Yeah, this kid's got tennis rackets for hands. I like it. He is. I like that he played. I like that he played a lot of years. This is going to be interesting. Unlike last year, where you just talked about two kids from Iowa in Fant and Hawkinson that both got drafted in the first round. This could be a year. I still think somebody's going to take a shot at a tight end in the first round, but it is possible this year that the tight ends go into the second round, just given their grades right now, and I'm grades from the combine.
You're right. And listen to this. Like again, you know how I feel about progressing in your college career, and he got better in just about all his stats throughout his career. But we just rattled off a lot of statistics, and granted, the wide receiver position, there's more than just one guy like there is. Most teams have just one tight end. Might run more, and they use this guy a lot more. But I said before when we were talking about Nate Stanley in Iowa, his junior year with those two guys, Hawkins Fan. It was Hawkins Fan. This guy, this last year had 61 catches for 830 yards. I mean, we're talking about more than Austin Mack and Victor in Ohio State this last year put together almost, right? 7 TDs. So, again, you are talking about somebody that an athlete, a pass-catching tight end, which the NFL likes, and, at some point he'll get drafted.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think he is a solid second-rounder at the least.
Yeah. What did I say, 6'4"? Yeah, 245. Yeah. That was the NFL. I saw another site. That's the NFL Draft Combine profile. On his ESPN profile, they have him at 6'5", 245.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's
with
not
tennis rackets.
It's not. Yeah,
with first base gloves.
Yes, it's not like this guy. Again, this is a very solid prospect. I think the challenge is right now with the way offenses are is everybody's looking for the Gronkowski Kelsey guy.
Yeah,
and those guys are so rare.
Yeah.
And in reality, you're going to find that I think Kelsey actually ends up being more prolific in the end, only because he's not taking the beating.
That's right, he doesn't.
That
he
Gronkowski
kind of knows
took.
how to catch the ball underneath, not like a tight end,
well,
like a slot guy.
Gronkowski looks like the Big Show, like he's huge. I mean, well, maybe not.
It's the Big Show.
Yeah, like he's just he's so enormous.
Like this new show on Netflix, The Big Show.
I have not seen.
It's not very good.
Okay, very good. Thanks for sharing.
I do love The Big Show.
But he was so enormous that guy constantly. When's the last time you saw him get tackled above the knees?
Right.
So he just took abuse. Whereas Kelsey's a more fluid runner, not quite as big. But here's my point: is most tight end, most teams aren't going to have that luxury. There just aren't those guys. I mean, the closest guys to him are like Zach Ertz, and to me, there's still a country mile between Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz. And certainly Gronkowski of the past. So you want a guy that can come in there. You want sure-handed. You want a guy that can create some mismatches. The question to me will be, can this guy put on a little bit more weight and still be functionally fast? If he can, You can work with him a little bit on chip blocking and those things
Yeah.
to get more traditional tight end use out of him.
Sure.
As opposed to just a pass catching tight end. Because unfortunately, if you're not Kelsey, I mean, Kelsey, I don't know. I can't remember. I mean, I know Kelsey blocks, but I can't remember the last time like they really tried hard to make him block.
Yeah.
Because he just doesn't. I mean, he's just so valuable out in basket.
Space blocking, but that's
no, but it's
more
like
with when he has his hands on the ball and he's just trying to run people over.
But he's such a mismatch nightmare
Right.
on the outside because no linebacker can run with him at his size, and certainly safeties are completely outmanned with him. So it just that's kind of the thing. I think this kid's got some talent. I think he's just got to be used correctly. And teams have to kind of temper their expectations of looking for that elite level tight end. They're just too hard to find.
Right. Okay, well, let's wrap it up. That ran maybe a little over half hour. Sorry, but that's wide receivers and tight ends in the Big 12 that are eligible for the draft this year.
That'd be the Big 10.
Yeah, names outside of the top 12 overall guys we saw in this conference. We've covered quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We'll do a quick one, hopefully, on offensive linemen because there are some, and we do need to talk about them, and it is the Big 10. So, offensive linemen, they grow those boys out in fields out there. So, all right. We'll wrap it up right there and see you next time on the Gridiron. Peace.